Dámy a pánové, dobrý večer. Vítejte ve vzducholodi Gulliver, vítejte v DOXu. Já rovnou přepnu do angličtiny, protože, jak víte, dnešní diskuze bude v angličtině. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome at DOX, welcome at the Gulliver Airship. Today, as you know, this evening will be dedicated to Kurdish literature. Some of you may know that our main exhibition downstairs at DOX at the moment is an exhibition about Iraq, about Kurdistan. It's an exhibition by Kurdish photographers, and it's one of the main aims of the exhibition is to present Iraq and Kurdistan in a different way from that which we know from the mainstream media. And as part of this exhibition, and as part of this other perspective that we would hardly ever get from regular channels that we follow, we have decided to invite one of the most acclaimed contemporary Kurdish writers, that is Mr. Bachtyar Ali. So I would like to welcome Mr. Bachtyar Ali and thank you for accepting the invitation. Also today on the panel will be a very important person, a translator from Kurdish to English, Mr. Kareem Abdulrahman. On here. And Mr. Abdulrahman is the author of the first ever translation of the novel by Mr. Bachtyar Ali from Kurdish to English. You will hear more about it tonight. You will hear more about Kurdish literature, about Mr. Ali's work. And finally, the person who took the task on himself to moderate the debate is the journalist and publicist, Mr. Petr Brod. So thank you very much and welcome. So I will give the floor straight to our guests. So I wish you a very good evening. And after this event, we'll invite you to the cafe where you'll have a chance to speak to the authors. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you for the introduction, Misha Shilpochova. Before we start, there's a technicality. I have to ask you all whether you are able to follow the conversation if it's all in English, or whether there's somebody who would prefer to have a translation into Czech, which would be available from our translator and interpreter who sits over there and raises his hand. So if there's anybody who wants to have a translation into Czech, please sit with our interpreter. I don't see anybody asking for it. So that's the translator. No. He was only raising his hand to show his position in the airship. Okay, so we can, I see that we have 100% support for English being the language of this evening. Thank you very much. Let me first introduce the two gentlemen who are the main personalities of this evening. You have already heard their names and you know their names from the program of this event, but let me add a few details about their personal background. Mr. Bachtyar Ali was born in Sulaimaniya in Iraqi Kurdistan in 1960. He has been in exile from Iraq or from Kurdistan for more than 20 years, and most of the time he has spent in Germany. He now lives in Cologne. He's a novelist and literary critic, essayist and poet, and one of the most prominent Kurdish writers. He's also one of the few to be translated into Western languages. One of the occasions for this evening was the recent publication, or is the recent publication, of his novel, I Stared at the Night of the City, which is the first Kurdish novel to be translated into English. He has published altogether 9 novels, or is it now more than 9? 11 novels and several collections of essays and poetry. His translator into English is Kareem Abdulrahman, who was also born in Sulaymaniyah, but he has been living in Britain, mostly in London, and he was born in 1976 in Sulaymaniyah. He's a journalist by training. He has a master's degree in journalism from the University of Westminster, and spent 8 years with the BBC working in its monitoring service in Caversham near Reading, near London, where he was translating from the Kurdish media for the Survey of World Broadcasts issued by the BBC. But a few years ago he left the BBC and now has his own company with a few other fellow Kurds, which is basically an agency continuing in a way what he was doing with the BBC, namely monitoring Kurdish media and informing about the content of their transmissions, all those who are interested in events in the Middle East, specifically in Iraq and in Kurdistan. He also cooperates with an institution called the British Centre for Literary Translation. And literary translation is indeed his second job and something he does with great fervor. Mr. Ali, I said that you were living in exile now, but it is an exile of a specific kind. You can return to your native country occasionally. You have a German passport. So, are you still in exile?
أتوان بلين لسه شمشي إكزيل تحدك شمشي زور كالا لبروي حتى أتوان تقسل كوتاي إكزيل بكين شمشي سال سردمي ديجيتال. No, wir haben schon das erklärt, dass oder mit Deutsch oder Kurdisch kann ich sprechen.
So I think it will be best if
Yeah, I'll be translating.
Yeah, wir haben so upgraded. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that exile as a concept has fainted over time, and I would go as far as saying that we can almost talk about the end of the concept of exile in modern times.
لسردمي ديجيتاليزيرن وسردمي فيرتواليتي ناتوانين زو كجاران قسل إكزيل بكينا.
In an age of digitalization and globalization, we can no longer talk about exile in the same way we used to talk about it.
بالنسبة إما راكردوي سردمي صدام حسين وسردمي شرنا أخوي كردستان بوي.
As far as we are concerned, I've escaped the Saddam Hussein's regime and the Kurdish civil war, which happened in the mid-90s.
بوي إما لدواي روخاني صدام ودواي غوراني باردوخي سياسي أتوين هاتو شي ولاتي خوما بكينواني.
And that's why after the change in the political system, when the Saddam regime is no longer there, and because of the changes in the political circumstances, I can now visit my home country.
وبراي من شمشي أدبياتي إكزيليا ناوناني همو نسراني كالولاتي خوانا نارجين بشمشي إكزيل شمشي شي زور هلايا.
And I personally think that to name all writers who don't live in their home countries as exiled writers is actually wrong.
لبروي بشي زوري نسراني دنيا لقوانا غيش تهدي كلاو لجيانا لولاتي خوانا نرجياو.
Because if you come to think about it, many writers throughout the world, at some stage of their life, they may not have lived in their own home countries.
The same question to you, Mr. Abdulrahman. Are you in exile now, and what were the reasons for which you left Kurdistan? When was it? Also in the 90s?
I also would actually come under a different category. It happened that I got a scholarship to study in the UK, and after I finished my scholarship, this is back in 2004, 2005, a job came up with the BBC, and I applied and I got the job. And at the same time, I married my girlfriend who was already living in London. So, and I stayed on beyond that. So I could stay by the virtue of of my marriage, if you like, but also because I was working for the BBC. So strictly speaking, I'm not a political exile by any sense of the word.
Let me return briefly to Mr. Ali's experience. He says that he left partly because of the regime of Saddam Hussein, but also partly because of the civil war that broke out between various factions of the Kurdish political spectrum in the early 90s, after the declaration of Kurdish autonomy in 1991. What was it that made him go away, that made him leave the country? Were there any, was he subject to any direct attacks, or what was it in the setup in Kurdistan after 1991 that forced him to go into what was then a full exile, really?
لدوای ساڵی 91 ئێمە کۆمەڵێک ڕۆشنبیر بووین کە دەستمان کرد بە کۆمەڵی چالاکی کولتوری.
After 1991, that is after the Kurdish uprising and when the Kurdish parties came to power, I and a number of other intellectuals, we started carrying out a number of cultural activities and projects.
پێشتر لە ناوەندی ڕۆشنبیری کوردیە تەنیا دوو جۆرە ئایدیا زاڵ بوون.
Before that, there were two distinct ideas in Kurdish culture about how intellectuals should work or function.
مارکسیزم و ناسیۆنالیزم.
One was tainted by Marxism, the other was nationalism.
کاتێک ئێمە دەستمان پێکرد وەکو گروپێکی بچکۆلەی گەنج ڕوانین و ئایدۆلۆژیا و تێڕوانینمان بۆ شتەکان تەواو جیاواز بوو لەگەڵ ئەو دوو ئایدۆلۆژیە باو زاڵایە.
As a group of young intellectuals and writers, we had a completely different approach to culture, and we were actually in disagreement with both strands.
ئێمە زیاتر لەژێر کاریگەری فەلسفەی نوێ و فەلسفەی نوێی پۆستمۆدێرن و فەیلسوفانی وەکو میشێل فۆکۆ و ژاک دێرێدا و ژاک لاکان و ئەوان نابووین کە دەستمان کرد بە نووسین.
When we started out writing, we were actually mostly under the influence of postmodern writers like Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Jacques Lacan, and the others.
لە توانڕوانینی ئێمە توانڕوانینیی ڕخنەگرانە بوو نەک بۆ تەنیا ڕژێمی سەدام حوسێن بەڵکو بۆ کۆمەڵگەی کوردی خۆشی.
We had a critical outlook not just towards the Saddam regime but also towards the Kurdish society itself as well.
چونکە کۆمەڵگەی کوردی خۆی لەناوە ڕخنەی خۆی نەکرد بوو.
Because the Kurdish society has not internally criticized itself.
ئێمە دەستمان کرد بە پرۆژەی ڕخنەکردنی کۆمەڵگەی کوردی لەناو خۆیە.
We started out a project where we carried out criticism of the Kurdish society internally.
چونکە پڕ بوو لە بنیادی نەگۆڕا و ڕق و ئامادە نەبوو بۆ گۆڕان کۆمەڵگەی.
Because it was full of rigid structures that were not criticized, that were not put under questions, and that have not been scrutinized before.
ئەو بوو بەهۆی بەرکەوتن و کۆنفلێکتێکی گەورە لە بینی ئێمە و لە بینی ئەو هێزە سیاسیانی کە لە ساحەی کوردیا بوون.
And that meant it actually led into a confrontation between us and the Kurdish political groups who have come to power.
ئەوە هۆی سەرچی لە دواوە کە شەڕی ناوخۆ دەسی پێکرد ڕاستیا ژیانی کەس لە ئەمانە نەما لە کوردستانە.
That was one reason, but also when the civil war started, no one's life was safe anymore in Kurdistan.
لەبەرەوە لە هەڕەشەی جیاوازمان لەلایەنی جیاوازەوە بووە کە نەمانەزانی چێن و چین.
We as writers were receiving threats from various people, and in many cases we didn't know which threat came from whom.
It is sometimes for us in Europe difficult to distinguish between the various factions of Kurdish political life. You said that the main streams at that time were the nationalists and the Marxists. Would you consider yourself, let's say, a liberal, secular, pluralist, Democrat, that sort of thing? And has the situation changed over the last 20 years while you have been away? Has the situation on the ground in Kurdistan become clearer, or is it still, is the political scene still under the dominance of the two mainstreams that you mentioned, the nationalists and the Marxists?
نەخێر بێگومان ئێستا مارکسیزم هێزێکی لاوازە لە چاو ساڵانی سەرەتای کۆتای هەشتاکان و نەوەتەکان.
Of course, things have changed. So Marxism is much weaker now compared to the late 80s and early 90s.
ناسیونالیزم هەمیشە بەهێز بۆ لە کوردستانە.
Nationalism has always been strong in Kurdistan.
بەڵام ئەوەی کە گەڕانەوە بوو بۆ دووە بەهێزبوونی شەپۆلە دینەکان و لە کوردستانە.
But what was a step backwards was the strengthening of the conservative and religious movements in Kurdistan.
بێگومان ئێمە کۆمەڵی خەڵک بووین خەومان بە کۆمەلگایەکی دیموکرات و لێبرال و کراوە سکولارەوە بینیە.
Of course, we were a group of people who were dreaming about a secular, democratic, liberal country.
بەڵام هەم هێزە سیاسی کوردیەکان هەم کۆمەلگای کوردی تا ئێستا لە پێشوازیکردن لەو ئایدیانە زەحمەتی زۆر و کێشەی زۆری هەیە.
However, both the Kurdish political parties and the Kurdish society at large are still find it very difficult to accept that vision of a secular, liberal, democratic society.
وەکو دروش من ڕەنگە هەموو قبوڵیان بێ بەڵام وەکو پراکتیک زۆر زەحمەتە تا ئێستا.
Of course, most of them do accept it as slogans, but when it comes to practice, they still find it challenging.
What is it like for a Kurd, for a Kurdish writer to live in a country so far away from home? It is often said that writers who emigrate from their countries, who go into exile, face almost insurmountable obstacles, that it's very difficult for them to find ground under their feet, and that many prefer to stay within the authoritarian bounds of their home countries because they feel that in a different country they couldn't speak to their countrymen, they couldn't master a new language and so on. How do you feel in this respect?
بێگومان مرۆڤ بەوەی دروست نەبوو کە لە ئەگزیل و لە پەناهەندەی یا بژیت.
Of course, one hasn't been born or even made to live in exile or away from his home country.
بۆیە ئەزمموی پەنابەری هەمیشە ئەزممونێکی سەختە بۆ نووسەر. دەست پێکردنەوەی بە زمان تۆ لە سەرتاوە ئەبێ زمان فێر بیتەوانێ ئەبێ هەموو شتەکان بناسیتەوانێ لەبەرەوە بۆ نووسەر ڕەنگە ئەزممونێکی زۆر سەختتر بێ لە مرۆڤی ئاسایی. مرۆڤی ئاسایی تەنیا پێویستی بە زمانە بۆی شتە ڕۆژانەکانی خۆی ڕێک بخاتەوانێ بەڵام بۆ نووسەرێک بێ سەر لە نوێ هەموو دنیا بە زمانێکی تر تێبگاتەوانێ ئەوە کارێکی ئاسان نییە.
So it's a very difficult process, the living in exile or living outside your home country is very difficult, and it's doubly difficult for a writer because you have to learn a language from scratch. And while this is a challenge for an ordinary person too, but an ordinary person needs a language for as much as to express himself or herself. But for a writer, they need to learn a language fluently to rebuild their world. And that means it's a much bigger challenge for them.
کێشەکەی من کێشەیەکی کولتوری نەبوو لەبەرەوەی من لە مناڵیەوە خوێندنەوەکانم خوێندنەوەی زیاتر ئەدەبیاتی ئەوروپی و فەلسفەی ئەوروپی بوو لە ڕووی کولتوریەوە تووشی شۆکێک نەبووم بەڵام لە ڕووی زەحمەتەکانی ژیان و ژیانی ڕۆژانەوە بێگومان ئەزمموی پەنابەری ئەزممونێکی زۆر سەختە.
I didn't experience a cultural shock as such because I've been reading European literature from when I was young. However, the biggest challenge for me was the day-to-day challenges and the practical problems one faces when you live outside your home country.
بێگومان پەیوەندیکردنیش لەگەڵ خوێنەرانەوە ئەو سەردەمی ئێمە هاتین زۆر سەخت بووە.
When I left the country, it was very difficult to create a bridge and a relationship with your readers.
بەڵام ئێستا ئاسانە بەهۆی پەیوەندی ئینتەرنێتی و پەیوەندی ڕۆژانەوە توانی هەموو ڕۆژێک پەیوەندی لەگەڵ وڵاتە بکەیت و ئەو دیستانسە ئەو مەسافەی کە لە بینی ئێرەوەیە زۆر بچووک بۆتەوانێ.
But nowadays it's actually a different story because on a daily basis you can be in touch with people because of the internet and because of the tools that are there. So we can say the distance has shortened considerably nowadays.
But when you started out in the West 20 years ago or so, was it an advantage to know that there is a wide and widespread Kurdish diaspora in the West, that for example in Germany where you chose to live, there are about 600,000 people whom we can call Kurds, although they're mostly Turkish passport holders. Did you find an immediate echo with those people in the West and in the diaspora?
هیچێک لە کێشەکان خۆی دابەشبوونی کۆمەڵگای کوردی لە دیاسپۆراش.
One of the problems is the divisions within the Kurdish diaspora abroad.
بۆ نمونە ئەو دابەشبوونی کە لە نێوان کوردەکانە هەیە لە نێوان کوردی پارچەکانی کوردستانە، عێراق، ئێران، تورکیا بە شێوەیەک لە شێوەکان لێرە هەرێمێنێتەوە.
So the divisions of the Kurds over countries into Iraq, Turkey, Syria and Iran, these divisions have carried on into the Kurdish diaspora as well.
هەڵبەت هەوڵ هەیە بۆ تێپەڕاندنی، بەڵام هەمیشە دیوارێکی دەرونی هەرێمێنێتەوە.
Of course there are efforts to overcome this, however there is a psychological barrier still between the different the speakers of the different parts.
لە ڕووی سیاسیەوە لە ڕووی سایکۆلۆژیەوە مرۆڤ هەوڵایە تێیپەڕێنێ، بەڵام کە هێتە سەر لایەنی پراکتیکی کە توێ پێکەوە کار بکەیت لە پرۆژەیەکە هەموو ئەو شەشانە زۆر گەورە بنەوەن لە بەرچاوت.
One can try to overcome these problems psychologically and ideologically, but when you want to take this to the level of practicality and you want to work with other Kurds in a project, then you will see it's quite challenging.
But nowadays, the Kurdish original versions of your books are printed first and foremost in Kurdistan. Who is your main target audience? Is it the Kurds living in Iraqi Kurdistan, or is it the world diaspora as well? And eventually, of course, now with the translations of your works, do you want to reach a wide Western audience as well?
بێگومان خوێنەرەکانی من بە دەرەجە یەکەم ئەو کوردانن کە دیالەکتێکی سۆرانیە خوێندنەوەیان، یعنی واتە ئەو کوردەکانی عێراق و ئێرانن بە شێوەیەکی گشتی.
For most parts, my main readers are Kurds who speak the Sorani dialect, which are Kurds who live in Iraq and Iran.
یا نزیکەی 12 میلیۆن بۆ 14 میلیۆن کوردی سۆرانی زمان هەن لە دنیاە.
There are up to 12 to 14 million Kurds who speak Sorani around the world.
من زۆر کەسە بینمەوە کە لە ئەوروپاژی بەڵێ کتێبەکان هێن وای خوێندنەوە لەوێەوە، بەڵام بڵێ نەشری من بە گشتی لە کوردستانەوەیە.
Of course, I do come across Kurds who live in Europe who have brought back my books from Kurdistan to read while they live in Europe. But mainly my main readership is still in Kurdistan.
And the subject matter of your books so far has largely been, apart from the essays, which I know sometimes touch on philosophical or literary matters, but the novels are all set in Kurdistan still.
Yes. بەڵێ هەموو بابەتی ڕۆمانەکان تا ئێستا ڕووداوەکانی لە ناو کوردستانە بۆ لە ناو کوردستانە.
All my novels so far have been set in Kurdistan.
ئەگەرچی من لە زۆر ڕۆمانە شوێن و کات بە دقیقی بە وردی دیای دەستنیشان ناکەم.
Although I don't specify time and place in many of my novels, I don't specify them to in detail, that is.
ئەمە ئەو ڕووداوە مێژوویەکان تەنیا وەکو پاشخانیە وەکو بۆ ڕووداوەکان دەربکەوێتەوانی، چونچە من مێژوونیست نیم و نامەوێ مێژوو بنووسمەوانە.
I want the historical events to act as a backdrop to my stories. However, I'm not a historian, and I don't want to act as a historian. I'm not interested in playing that role.
بۆیە زۆربەی ڕۆمانەکانم هەوڵێم ڕەهەندێکی یونیڤەرسالی تیابێ، دەمێشنێکی یونیڤەرسالی تیابێ.
That's why there's a universal dimension in most of my novels.
We're coming to that, the universal dimension, which has apparently caught the attention of at least one English publisher or one British publisher. When you approached the Times Literary Supplement, which is an important organ of literary life in Britain, they showed interest in the book. I stared at the night of the city even before it was translated. What do you think made it so interesting to the editors of TLS?
The TLS as a publication has a section where they review novels that have not appeared in English. So that was a very good starting point. However, before contacting them, I had already written a feature for the BBC about this particular novel. And that's because when it was published in Kurdistan, it was a sensation, both in literary terms, but also in publishing terms. That's because 10,000 copies of the book was printed in Kurdish, which is huge by the standards of Kurdistan and even the Middle East. And also, the publisher was so confident that it will do well, he was able to pay Bachtyar an advance, which is again something that doesn't happen a lot because most books don't sell enough to be able to give that sort of confidence to writers. But also the subject matter was interesting enough for the magazine to want to review this, to run a review of this book.
And what did they pick up? What caught their eye? What made it interesting for the Western reader, or for the British reader, or American reader, Anglo-Saxon reader, to present the book as even before it was translated?
I think there are a number of reasons why I personally, and also by extension the magazine, found the book interesting. I think the Western audience in general, they know a few things about Kurdistan. They know the Kurds were persecuted under Saddam. They know the Kurds have been running their own autonomous region since 1991. They know a few things, but these are only little details and only scratches the surface of things. What this novel is doing is setting all the action within that time frame. So while it's telling you about the major developments of the past 30, 40 years, it goes deeper and it tries to scrutinize what happens beneath that.
Were you perhaps thinking of the Western reader while writing this book, or wasn't it in the back of your mind?
بهيج جوركنا بيرم لخوين رول ترجمة كتابة كان نكردو أوكي.
Not at all. I've never thought about the translation of my work when I write them.
من أتوانم بس لأزموني خوم كم لقال ترجمة ألمانيا كان الرومانا كان.
I can speak about my own experience with the German translations of my novels.
لبروي لصالي بار لما هو صالك زياد لسيوبيانش كور وخنوم وكتابة كهب ولا الشاري جواز لألمانيا.
Because last year I attended up to 35 events where I read, where I talked about a different novel of mine that was translated into German.
Which is the novel that's called in English, The World's Last Pomegranate.
And also another novel that's called The City of the White Musicians.
أمدو أزموني من لقلم دو الرومانوية من لسرتا زورة ترسام لبروي كهردو الرومانكا زور بيوندي بميرجو لوكالية موهية.
Initially, I was very concerned because both novels dwell a lot on the local Kurdish history.
بلام لا بيونديم لقل خوانركاني ألمانيا چونش لما وي صالك زياد لشجر شاب كراي وكتابك سرنج ما كأدبياتي باش كببي أوي كحتى انترسي سياسي شبابي أوي كخلق بدوي بابته السياسي كان أبقر أجر أدبياتي باش بأتواني خوي بسبيني للدروي انترسي سياسي.
However, one of the things that I found out in the past year was that interesting novels will attract the interest of readers if they are good literature, regardless of whether the readers know about the history of and the setting in which that book is set or not. Initially, I was concerned, but my experience of all those different seminars and talks proved something else, and my novel has been republished 6 times in the past year in Germany.
یەکێ لە کێشە گەورەکانی تەماشاکردنی غەرب بۆ شەرق بەستنەوەی ئەدەبیاتی شەرقی هەمیشە بەو توراسە کۆنەی هەزار شەو و یەک شەوەوارەیەکە تا ئێستا لە خەیاڵی غەربیە بەو چاوە تەماشای خۆر هەڵاتەکەن.
One of the problems in the West when it comes to looking at the East and Middle Eastern literature is that a lot of people in the West still look at the Middle East with the same eyes of looking at 1001 Nights, the famous Arabic epic.
لێرۆ زۆر جار تەواوی کێشەکان هەر بەو ئەگەرچی مەسەلە من پەیوەندی ئەدەبیاتی من تا ئەندازێکی زۆر لەگەڵ ڕیالیزمی جادووی مۆدێرنایە بەڵام هەمیشە ئەو ڕەهەندا بەستنەوە بە
Although my connection, my literary connection is much stronger with a modern literary magical realism, however, some readers in the West will still try to find a connection between my novel and the Eastern sense of the magic and the magic tradition in the East itself.
So is there a bit of fairy telling in the novel as well, in the tradition of 1001 Nights?
بێگومان ڕەگەزی سیحراوی لەناو ڕۆمانەکانی منە هەیە ڕەگەزی هەمیشە دوو ئاستێ ئاستێکی واقعی مێژووی لەگەڵ ئاستێکی یۆتۆپی خەیاڵی ئەزانین.
Of course, there's if you can call it a magical element into my novels. You always have two levels in my novels. One is the historical and the realist level, and then you have the utopian, more imaginative level in my books.
هەستەکەم ئەوش پەیوەندی بە ئێمە هەیە لە خۆرهەڵاتەوە لەبەرەوەی پەیوەندی بە مێژووی مۆدێرنی ئێمەوە هەیە چونکە مێژووی مۆدێرنی ئێمە لە دوو ئاست پێکاتەوە ئاستی واقعی کە ئاستێکی پڕ تراژیدیە و وێرانەیە و ئاستی دووەم ئاستی خەون و خەیاڵ و هەڵهاتنە لەو واقعەتاڵی کە تیاژین.
And that's, I think, is due to the experiences of our people in modern times, because we have witnessed and undergone many tragedies and difficulties. So the reality itself is quite bitter. And then we have tried to compensate this with utopias and dreams. And that's the second level. So that means we are really oscillating between a wasteland and the dreamland.
ئەو جانیبەی کە فانتازیە کە خەیاڵێ لە ڕۆمانەکانی منە کەمتر بە پەیوەندی بە مێژووی ئەدەبیاتی دیێرینی ڕۆژهەڵاتەوە هەیە ئەوەندەی پەیوەندی بە دۆخی سایکۆلۆجی ئێستای مرۆڤی خۆرهەڵاتیەوە هەیە.
So that's why the magical element in my books is not so much related to the ancient tradition of magical writing in the East. It's rather related to the psychological state of the humans in modern times in the Middle East.
So since you're a literary critic too, can we call it a postmodern novel about modern Kurdish society?
من خۆمەک و خوێنەر بەردەوام لەژێر کاریگەری پۆستمۆدێرنەکان نابووم.
As a reader, I've always been under the influence of the postmodern writers.
وەکو نووسەری وتار و شتانە زۆر هەم لە وتارەکانمان چەمک و ئەو مەفاهیمانم بەکارهێنەوە چەمکانم بەکارهێنەوە کە فەیلسوفە پۆستمۆدێرنەکان بەکارهێنن بۆ خوێندنەوەی ژیان و کۆمەڵگە.
And in my essays, I've employed the concepts that were developed by the postmodern thinkers to read modern phenomena.
بەڵام بۆی مێژووی خۆرهەڵات بەڕاستی بژێڕیتەوە لە ڕاستیە پێویستت بە میتۆدێکی ڕۆژهەڵاتیانەیە بۆ بیرکردنەوە.
But to recount the history of the Middle East, you would need a Middle Eastern method and way of thinking.
بۆیە بەردەوام من ئەگەر لەژێر کاریگەری زۆر شتی غەربی شابووم هەوڵم ماوەکو و کەرەستە فکری غەربی بەکاربێنم بۆ خوێندنەوەی واقعی خۆرهەڵاتی خۆی.
So even if I have been under the influence of the Western thought, I have tried to use these as tools to read the Middle East itself.
چونچە ئەگەر بە چاوێکی غەربیانە تەماشای خۆرهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست بکەی ناتوانی بەتەنیا لەو ڕێگایەوە تێی بگەیت.
Because if you purely look at the Middle East from a Western perspective, you are not going to fully understand it.
لێرە فکری غەربی فەلسفەی غەربی هونەری غەربی کەرەستەمانایەتێ بەڵام ناوەڕۆکە ڕاستەقینەکەی بێ ڕۆژهەڵاتیان نەبێت.
That's why in the West offers us the tools and the methods that we can employ. However, the material itself has to come from the East itself.
I read somewhere that there are several narrators in the book who are all unreliable. Is it also an Eastern sort of Oriental feature, or why are they all unreliable? Don't we need a reliable element in a book to make us, to give us firm ground, so to speak, and to enable us to distinguish what is right and what is wrong?
لا 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 ادبيات همیشه فانتازیا خزمەتی حقیقە دەکات تا ئەندازەیەکی زۆر خزمەتی ڕاستیە جێڕانەوەی واقعەکە با بڵێین.
In literature, fantasy is always in the interest of telling, is employed in the interest of telling the truth.
وەکو پیکاسۆ لێ هونەر ئەو درۆیەیە کە لە ڕێگایەوە حقیقە دۆزینەوە.
As Picasso said, art is the light through which we understand the reality.
بۆیە ئەو چەمکە ناواقعیی ڕۆمانەکانی من لە ڕاستیە چەمچێکە ئاسانترە توانم لە ڕێگایەوە نییە وەسفی واقعی پێ بکەم تاوەکو بڵێ من خوێنەر نابمە دنیایەکەوانێک کە پەیوەندی بە واقعەوە نەمێنێت.
Although this label of unrealistic has been given to some of my work, but this feature has actually helped me describe the reality better. And I would never take readers into a world that has nothing to do with the reality itself.
لێرە ئەم بەشێک لە کارەکانی خۆم بۆ پێشەنگای خوارەوە بەستمەوە گەر بکرێت.
And if possible, I would like to make a link between my work and the exhibition that you are hosting downstairs.
لە ڕۆمانی شاری مۆسیقارە سپیەکانە قسە لە شوێنێکی خەیاڵیەکرێ شارێکی خەیاڵیەکرێ کە ئینسان کارە هونەریەکان و ئەو ئیشانی کە فەوتاوەنی ئەو ئیشانی کە هونەرمەندەکان بەرهەمی هێن بەڵام توانای ژیان ومانە و بەردەوامیان نامێنێنیە لە جێگایەکی تایبەتیە پارێزراوە کە جێگایەکی خەیاڵیە.
In one of my novels, The City of the White Musician, it talks about this imaginary place where the works of art that were not that didn't have a chance to be shared and to make it out, they are preserved somewhere, and this place is an imaginary place that doesn't exist in reality.
شوێنێکی خەیاڵیە کە تیا ئینسانەکان ڕابردوو و هاوار و ئازارەکانی خۆیانی تیا هەڵەگرن.
It's an imaginary place where the humans preserve their cries, their dreams, and their artworks.
لە پێشانگەکەی خوارەوە منەوەم بینی پیاوێک کە خۆی مردووە و وێنەکانی ماوەتەوانی وێنەکانی هەڵگیراوانی چەندین ساڵە وێنانە هەڵگیراو نەتەوانی و ئێستایەنە دەرێ. ئێمە کە مەسەلە لە خۆرهەڵاتە هەمیشە پێویستیمان بە جێگایەکی ئەفسانەی هەیە خەیاڵی هەیە بۆی ئەو شتانی کە هەمیشە لە فەوتان نزیکن هەمیشە لە وێران بیون نزیکن بیان پارێزین.
In the exhibition downstairs we have a story of a man who has taken many photographs, and these photographs didn't have a chance to be presented while he was alive. After he died, they were preserved for many years, and then they had a chance to be put on show partly through this exhibition. In the Middle East and in the East in general, we need a space where we can preserve our artwork. Preserve them because we are always almost one step away from the danger of them being destroyed and having that chance to be shared.
لەم شاری مۆسیقارەکان سپیەکانە قسە لە مۆزەخانەیەکی خەیاڵیە کە هەموو ئەو کارانە پارێزت واڵیانەگرێت.
In the City of the White Musicians, I am talking about an imaginary museum that preserves all these types of artwork and keep them for posterity.
لە خۆرهەڵاتە ئێم من خۆم وەکو مرۆڤ چەندەها مرۆڤی بەهرەمەندم بینیوە کە کوژراون یا لە زیندانە لە ناو چوون یان هەروازیان هێناوە لە هونەر لەبەرەوەی نەیانتوانیوە لە ڕێگە هونەرەکەی خۆیان پارێزن یا پیشانی بن.
I've seen many people in the Middle East who were very talented artists, writers, who were killed or who died in prison or who just gave up because they didn't have a chance to develop and share their art.
خەیاڵ لای من ڕزگارکردنی ئەو شتە واقعیانەیە کە لە ڕاستیە لە واقعیا بە زەحمەتیە پارێزرێن.
Imagination to me is rescuing and preserving these things that the reality is trying to take away from us.
یعنی پرۆسەیەکی ڕزگارکردنە زیاتر.
It's a process of preservation.
We've decided to offer you, the audience, a sample from the novel in both Kurdish and English. The Kurdish piece will be read by the author himself, and the English translation by our translator, and interpreter, Mr. Pivona. Perhaps this is the right moment to say that Kurdish is an Indo-European language that is even distantly related with Czech and English. Although it may not seem that way if you listen to it. It is also fairly closely related to Persian. And you mentioned the Sorino dialect. How important is it within the dialects of Kurdish?
دوو دیالکتی سەرچیمان هەیە کە کرمانجی و سۆرانی ئێمە.
There are two main Kurdish dialects, Sorani and Kermanji.
هەڵبەت نزیکی هەیە لە نێوانیانە بەڵام بە حکمیەوەی کە دابڕانێکی سیاسی شەبووە ڕەنگە یەکەم جار کە یەکێک لە زمانەکە نزیکەی بێتەوانێ بە زەحمەت وابزانێ وەکو دوو زمانی جیاواز سەیریان بکازانین.
Of course, there are similarities between the two dialects, but because of the political divisions, the two dialects appear very different. And when you look at them at first glance, they may even appear as two different languages.
بەڵام فێربوونی هەردوو دیالکتێکەکە لە ماوەیەکی کەمە ئاسانە بۆ ئەوەی یەکیان بزانێت بە بڕای من نەزانین.
But speakers of either dialect can learn the other dialect in fairly a short time.
And is there any literature of the sort that we're talking about now in the case of Bachtyar Ali in Kermanji as well?
Yes, indeed, there are a number of very good Kermanji writers as well.
Halim Yusuf, Jan Dost,
For example, Halim Yusuf and Jan Dost. They are very good writers.
And when we say that the novel I Stared at the Night of the City is the first Kurdish novel translated into a Western language, that means that there are no Kermanji novels translated into Western languages yet.
هەندێک لە ڕۆمانەکانی محەممەد ئۆزۆن کراوەتە سویدی و ئەڵمانی و وەبزان بە ئینگلیزیش وەبزان.
Some of Muhammad Ozon's novels have been translated into Swedish and German. I would like to add here, we are only talking about the first Kurdish novel translated into English. I and my publisher and the people we have consulted, we don't know about Kurdish novel translation into other European languages. But at the time of publication, this was the only Kurdish novel that has been translated into English. And now there is also a novel by Halim Yusuf that has also been translated into English.
Mr. Ali, can you tell us, before you read the extract, can you tell us in a few sentences where in the book you start and what is the situation, sort of a prologue to the extract?
Okay.
You're referring to the part we are going to read out?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay. ئەوەی کە لێرە منی خوێنمەوە باسی پیاوێکە کە لە بەڕێگاوێ بۆ بەرەو جێگایەک من سەرەتایی تێکستەکە خوێن.
ویستم لە شوێنی کەو خوێنینەوە.
Okay.
شەرحی کەم شوێنەکە شوێن. Because I've picked where we read. There's a character in the novel. His name is Hassani Tufan. He is a former assassin. And this guy has gone into retreat for 6 years where he has made rose water with his mother. In this 6th year, he goes through a purification process, if you like. And now the Kurdish parties are approaching him and trying to lure him back to his old ways. And he's surprised why they are so interested in him and why they are offering him all sorts of rewards to invite him back into the world of violence.
من نەمەزانی ئەم پیشەی ئێمە لە چ ئان و ساتێکە پەیوەندی بە هیچەوە نەماوە. برادەرەکانم وەک ئەو بەرگدرۆ لاتانەیان لێ هاتبوو کە کورتانی کەر و کەوای پاشاشیانە دووری. بەڵام من وازم هێنا و بە بێدەنگی ماڵاواییم لە هەموو شتێک کرد. ماڵاواییم لە هەموو شتێک کرد و چوومەوە بۆ لای دایکم و بە کەوجیرێکەوە و بە دیار مەنجەڵە پڕ گوڵە باخەکەیەوە دانیشتم. لە ساڵانی شەڕی ناوخۆیە من لە بری شەڕ و خەڵک کوشتن لەگەڵ دایکمە خەریکی دروستکردنی و شوشە گوڵاوانە بووم کەیان کرد بە کوژراوەکانەوە. خۆشحاڵ بووم دوجار شتێکی باش بۆ شەهیدەکانەکەم. هەمووت گەر بێت و زەمن بگەڕێتەوە دواوە لەگەڵ دایکمە تەنیا خەریکی گوڵاو دروستکردنە بم. لە سەردەمی شەڕی ناوخوا هەندێک لە هاوڕێکانم نرخیان بە جۆرێکی سەیر فڕی. هەندێکیان لە پلۆپایی سیاسیە بەرز بوونەوە و وایان لێ هات خەڵکی وەک من بە ئاسانی ناگەیشتە بەرقاپیان. هەندێکیان تێوەگلان و خەڵکیانێکیان کوشت نەیاری وڵاتانی دیبوون و بۆ داڵتە و پەنا هاتبوونە شار و مەملەکەتی ئێمە. هەندێکیان هەگەر وەک جارانمانەوە و بوونەوە پیاوکوژی زۆر ڕیسووە کە بە پارەی زۆر کەم خەڵکی زۆر سادە و بەستەزمانیانە کوشت. ساڵانی شەڕی ناوخۆ هەندێک باری دەرونیم تێگەچوو، هەندێک کات باری دەرونیم تێگەچوو، هەندێک کاتی دیش باش و بەختیار و خۆشبەخت بوو. کاتێکی زۆرم لەگەڵ ئەو پیرێژنانە بەردەسەر کە هاتن بۆ لای دایکم و لە زەمین و باخێکی خەیاڵیەوە گوڵیان بۆ هێناین تا گوڵاویان لێ بگرین. من سوودێکی زۆرم لە حیکمەتی ئەوان بینی. هەر کات تووشی غەمۆچیە بووم گژوجای ئەو تویان بۆ پەیدا کردم و ئاوێتی ئەو تویان بۆ گرتمەوە دەم و دەست ئەیکردمەوە بە مرۆڤێکی خۆشحاڵ و ڕوو بە خەندە. بۆنی ئەو گوڵانە منیان بە جۆرێکی سەیر بە ماڵی خۆمانەوە گریا کە بە پێچەوانەی بۆنی پیسی دنیای دەرەوە هێند سیحراوی بوو وەها لە دڵمەوە ئاڵا نەیهێش بجوڵێم و وەک زنجیر پێبەستی کردم. ئەو بۆنە خۆشانە ئەو گوڵە سیحراویانە منیان کرد بە بوونەوەرێکی ماڵی. من و دایکم پارێکی کەممان دەسەکەوت بەڵام زۆر ئاسوودە بووین. سپاس. Thank you.
Thank you. I think at first we thought that the extract in English would be read by Mr. Pevana, but Kareem is ready to read it himself, and he's the author of the English version, so let him execute that task.
I didn't know at what moment our profession became disconnected from everything else, but I quit and quietly bade goodbye to everything and went home to my mother and sat by her rose-filled post with a skimmer in hand. During the years of the civil war in the mid-1990s, instead of fighting and killing people, my mother and I made the rose water to sprinkle on the dead. I was pleased that I was finally doing something good for the martyrs. I used to say that if I could go back in time, I would dedicate myself only to making rose water with my mother. During the civil war, the prides of some of my friends soared so high and their political standing went up so much that someone like me could not easily reach the doorstep of their offices. Some of them were implicated in awful things, such as the killing of dissidents from other countries who took refuge in our city and country. Some of them stayed where they were and became cheap assassins who killed simple and innocent people for very little money. During the civil war years, sometimes I fell down and at other times happy. I spent a lot of time with the old women who visited my mother and brought us roses from imaginary gardens and lands to make rose water. I benefited a lot from their wisdom. Whenever I felt depressed, they found herbs and prepared solutions for me that immediately brought back a smile to my face. The smell of roses tied me to our home in a very unusual way, which, unlike the smell of the outside world, was magical and wrapped itself so tightly around my heart that it didn't allow me to move. The pleasant smells and the magical flowers turned me into a domesticated animal. My mother and I made little money, but we were completely at peace. On some nights, ignorance got the better of me, and for no good reason, I would start telling stories of my murder to my mother. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abdulrahman, you're, as a former BBC monitor of Kurdish media, you're used to translating political, economic, social texts, but translating such a novel, I presume, is a bit different. Was it more difficult than what you were used to? Did you find yourself at times perhaps without a clue? And did you have to ask the author? How did the cooperation between you work?
Translation is a lonely job. You've heard writers and artists say theirs is a lonely job, but if there is definite lonely job, it's that of a Kurdish translator. And that's simply because you don't have the resources that translators of any other language would have. For starters, you don't have Kurdish English dictionaries. You have some dictionaries, but they are nothing that can really help you when you translate a novel, because they are not produced by either good linguists or good institutions. So you have to go really the circumstantial way to just find the meaning of a word sometimes. So I might be consulting my mom or sister or brother or neighbor, or I might have to go to Google Images, or sometimes I would just have to find the same word in Arabic or Persian, much richer languages and who have much better resources, and through the Arabic and the Persian to find the English meaning. And of course I was in constant contact with Bachtyar himself, and we would go through a lot of discussions about the meaning of words, about idioms and what have you. In terms of that shift from translating news mainly into literature, I've always been, my degree is in English literature, so I'm someone who was always into literature, and I'm a reader of fiction especially. And I've translated the other way, English into Kurdish. Accidentally, one of my unpublished translation is Milan Kundera's Ignorance, which is apt to mention here. So when the opportunity came up to translate the book, it was because a literary agent got in touch with me after he saw the review that we mentioned earlier. He asked if there are professional Kurdish literary translators. And I told him, half jokingly, if there were professional Kurdish translators, we would have a good number of Kurdish novels translated into English. But the fact that you don't have Kurdish novels in English tells you we don't have professional in the strict sense of the word. However, I think I have the right experience, and I'm willing to, as a leap of faith, to do a sample of the novel. And if it's good enough, we can take it from there. If not, then we'll see how it goes. So when I did the sample, he really liked it. And then when I took it to publishers, of course, I had to approach various publishers before I found one. They were very happy with the translation, and that's how I did it. But one other aspect of the translation that I would like to mention here is that because, after all, English is not my first language, I thought it would be good to cooperate with an English native speaker who was a good editor, a good writer, I'm talking about close cooperation. And at the time, I had a very close friend at the BBC. Her name is Melanie. Melanie is English, and she translates from French and Russian into English. And she's a very experienced news editor as well as a translator. So she agreed to edit all the book after the first draft is done as a very generous, friendly gesture. So what we did, I would translate a chapter, would send it to her, she would send it back with her comments. There were things I would agree and I would change. There were things I thought I was right, I would keep, because I was the only one who spoke both languages well enough to make that call.
من حەزەکەم شتێک زیاد بکەم بۆ تۆ کاک کەریم. سەبەبێکی گەورەی کە نەبوونی تەرجەمە پەیوەندی بە مێژووی سیاسی زمانی کوردیەوە هەیە.
One of the main, I'd like to add a few things here. One of the main reasons why we don't have much translation is to do with the political history of the Kurds.
زمانی کوردی زمانێک بۆ زوربەی قۆناغە مێژووەکان زمانێکی قەدەغە بووە.
Historically, for large periods of time, Kurdish has been banned.
لەبەرەوە گرنگ بۆ تەنیا زمانەکە بپارێزین ئەوەندەی بیرمان لە پاراستنی خودی زمانەکە کردوتەوە بیرمان لە وەرگێڕانی نەکردوتەوانێ بۆ شتێک بۆ سەر زمانەکانی تر.
That's why for us the main thing and the main responsibility we felt was that to be able to preserve the language. We didn't go one step further and think about translating it into other languages.
زمانێک کە لە خەتەرا بێت کە تۆ بزانی لەوانەیە لەناو بچێ یەکەم جار هەوڵەیە کە زمانەکە خۆی بپارێزیت.
When a language is facing extinction, your first thought is try to save the language, rescue the language.
بۆی نووسین بە کوردی خۆی ئەکتێکی سیاسی بووە گەرچی ناوەڕۆکەکەش سیاسی نەبوو بێت.
That's why writing in Kurdish is a political act, even when the content of what you are doing is not political.
Before we came up here, we saw the exhibition Před očima příběhy Iráku downstairs. I just wonder with what feelings you went through there and what images it conjured up in your mind.
پێشانگایەکی بۆ من زۆر سەرنجڕاکێش و جوان بوو ئەگەرچی تەنیا لەسەر هەندێک ڕەهەندی ژیان لە عێراق و کوردستان وەستا بووە.
It was a very interesting and beautiful exhibition, even though it only dwelled on some aspects of life in Kurdistan and Iraq.
تەنیا هەندێک ئەوەی کە بۆ من سەرنجڕاکێش بوو ئەو جانب ئەو تێکەڵاویە بوو کە لە ژیانی عێراقا پیشانیەیە بۆ نمونە لە شوێنێکە تۆ تەماشاکەیت سەربازە جەنگە بەڵام هەمان کات مۆسیقایە هەمان کاتە شاییە هەمان کاتە ینی خەڵکی ئاسایی پیشانە لە ساتە ئاساییەکان و ساتە نائاساییەکانە.
What was especially interesting for me was how various things were mixed in these photographs. So you had, for example, a soldier who was going through a difficult moment, but at the same time dancing and singing. So you had ordinary people doing ordinary things, but ordinary people going through very unordinary stuff.
ئەوەی کە بۆ من لە زۆر لەم چالاکیانە دووبارە بێتەوە سەرنجێم ئەوەیە کە کۆمەڵگای کوردی کۆمەڵایگای عێراقی بەگشتی کۆمەلگایکی شارنشینن بەڵام ئەم جۆرە چالاکیانە زۆر کەم ئەو جانیبە پیشانەیەنەوانی لە ژیانی کۆمەلگایە.
One of the things I noticed about this exhibition and similar projects is that although the Kurdish and Iraqi society is mostly an urban one, but these projects don't reflect this side of the society.
لەبەرەوەی کوردستان و عێراق تا ئێستا کۆمەڵێک شاری گەورەن و ژیان بە شێوەی سەرەکی لەناو شارانە ئەبرێ بەڕێوانیە.
The main population centers in Iraq are big cities, and the big cities are where most of the activities of the society occur.
پێشانگاکە زۆر جوانە بەڵام ئەوە جانیبێکێتی کەمتر ژیانی شاری لای ئێمە پیشانەیەتەوانە.
It's a very, very beautiful exhibition. However, one aspect that it's not dwelling on enough is it's the urban life.
Is this also your opinion? Do we have too many rural images? Almost, I thought at one, you're right, in some cases I thought of the Bible, you know, this wide landscape with sheep, old women and children.
I share Bachtyar's point, although when I go to Kurdistan every year, I notice that I come back almost always only taking photographs of the landscape. And that's mainly because our cities are so ugly, because there is no urban planning. And I think as a photographer, you might be unconsciously doing it because of this. But I completely agree. And this is not just something to do with this exhibition. For example, the Iranian cinema is a great cinema, but most of their films, with a few exceptions, still center around what happens in a few villages in the middle of nowhere. But my own impression, I was very touched with the exhibition, and I was extremely impressed that something so wonderfully put together in one space, and it showed so many different aspects of life in Kurdistan and Iraq. And as someone who is from that part of the world, I could relate to so many of the things, whether it is picnic spots, whether it was the where children played, and the rest of it. I really enjoyed it.
بۆ من ئەوەش گرنگ بوو هەم لایەنی هونەری تایە بەرزەوە هەم ناوەڕۆکیشی هێوێنەکانەوەمە کەم جار لە وێنەکەوە بێتەوانە.
What's important for me is that it had the right combination of the artistic aspect of it is very good, but the content of the photos are also very powerful. You rarely see these two coming together so well in the work of photography.
In preparing for this conversation, I also read an obituary of Jalal Talabani, the former Iraqi president. He was president of Iraq between 2005 and 2014. He was the first Kurd to be the head of state in Iraq, and he had a very checkered career, a very complicated one. I tried to understand it, but I must admit that it's very difficult, and I gave up after a while because there were so many twists and turns in his political career that it is difficult to understand the gist of it. At times he was friendly with Saddam Hussein. At times he was leading the resistance against him. What is it that makes Kurdistan such a complicated polity, such a complicated society? And do we see now a sort of coming together of Kurdish society, perhaps also because all Kurds had to fight against the challenge of the Islamic State, and they have been very effective, and they have shown a sort of national unity in this struggle?
مەترسیەکان لەسەر کۆمەڵای کوردی هەمیشە مەترسی زۆر گەورن، ینی مەترسی ئاسایینین، بۆیە سیاسەتی کوردی هەمیشە هەوڵیەوە سیاسەتێکی زۆر پراگماتی بێت.
The threats that are facing the Kurdish society are massive ones, and this has been the case most of the time. And because of that, Kurdish politicians have often tried to be pragmatic about things.
بەڕای من ئەو هەموو ناکۆچەی کە لە سیاسەیەکی وەکو جەلال تاڵەبانی گێڕینەوە ئەگەڕێتەوە بۆ دۆخی وجودی کورد خۆشی.
All the contradictions that you find in someone like Jalal Talabani, you can actually attribute to the ontological state of the Kurdish human being individually as well.
لەبەرەوەی دۆستی ڕاستەقینە نییە لە ناوچەی خۆرهەڵاتەوە لە جیهانیشا بۆ کورد. هەموو دۆستەکان دۆستی کاتین، بۆیە کورد مەجبورە تەنیا تەحالوفات هاوپەیمانەتی زۆر کاتی ببەستێت لەگەڵ دۆست دوشمنەکانی.
Because in the Middle East and actually in the wider world, the Kurds only have temporary friends at best and temporary allies, and that's why all the Kurds can do is try to have an alliance that's temporary, because they know this won't last.
هەمیشە دوشمنەکانیان لە خۆیان بەهێزترە، لەبەرەوە مەجبورن پەنابەرنە بەر دوشمنێکی تر لە کاتێکی دیاریکراوە لە دوشمنێکی گەورەتر بیان پارێزێ.
And because their enemies have always been stronger than them, they often have resorted to a second enemy that's weaker than the other enemy to help them face the challenge.
وبدرجاي مێژووی کوردوا بووە لەگەڵ عێراق شەڕمان بردو هەوڵمانەوە هاوپەیمانی لەگەڵ ئێرانە بەستین کە لەگەڵ ئێرانە شەڕمان کردووە لەگەڵ عێراق هاوپەیمانیمان بەستووە.
And that has been the case throughout history. In the Iran-Iraq war, when the Kurds were fighting Iraq, they went into an alliance with Iran. But then when they fought Iran, they went into an alliance with Iraq.
پەیوەندی بەو دۆخەن سەختەوەیە کە کوردی تیا لە ناوچەی ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاستە.
So this contradiction should be attributed to the very difficult situation that the Kurds have found themselves in the Middle East.
Some commentators think that now there has occurred a window of opportunity for the Kurds to assert their will to statehood, that there is now an opportunity for them to gain real independence rather than only autonomy within Iraq. But they say at the same time that this may destabilize parts of the Middle East. Now, do you see in your compatriots, do you think that most Kurds really see as their long-term goal the independence of Kurdistan, full independence, full sovereignty? And do you think that you might see it in your lifetime? This is a question to both of you.
بۆ من مەسەلەی ڕزگاربوون و مەسەلەی دروستکردنی دەوڵەتی کوردی و سەربەخۆی کوردستان شتێکە خەونێکە لە گیانی هەموو کوردێکایە بە بڕای من.
I personally think a Kurdish state is a dream that's it's every Kurdish individual's dream.
بەڵام من لەو بڕوام کە ئێمە لە ژیانی خۆمانە نایبینین.
But I personally think I wouldn't see it in my lifetime.
لەبەرەوەی ئەو دوشمنانی کە هەن زۆر لە ئێمە بەهێزترن و بارودۆخی سیاسی خۆشمان کورد لەناوە بە ئەندازەیەک پارچە پارچەیەوە کۆمەلگایەکی نایەک گورتومان هەیە هێنانەدی و خۆنە لە ئێستا زۆر کارێکی سەختە.
And that's because our enemies are much stronger than us, but also the Kurdish society itself is very disjointed. And because of these two factors, it's very difficult to make this happen.
No, your own opinion?
I agree to a large degree here. Like, I think it depends how you look at the picture. One problem is that, for example, for Iraqi Kurds, who at some level might be the closest to achieving this dream, they are landlocked. And we are landlocked and we are at the mercy of the neighbors for absolutely everything. So even if you want basic provisions, you need either Iran or Turkey or Baghdad, let alone everything else. So if your neighbors just decide to close the borders on you, they don't really need to do much else to make this collapse as a project. But the other thing is that the Kurds in Iraq especially, we had 25 years, the past 25 years, to build the trappings of a state properly, to build institutions, to build a strong economy, to build a good education and health system. And we have miserably failed in that. And I think if we now go to the next step and try to create a state just because someone might think the opportunity is there, I think we don't have the foundations, we don't have the full opportunity in the bigger sense of the word to make that a successful project.
Is this sort of criticism that you've just uttered to be found in Kurdistan proper? I mean, is there full freedom of speech? Are voices like yours being heard there?
There are people, intellectuals, journalists, who do voice these opinions, but it often comes at a price. It's not the same as elsewhere in the Middle East, where it might be fully totalitarian, but you know, if you are saying what the authorities don't like to hear, one day you may pay for it. It may not be direct persecution necessarily, but it depends how far you'll go with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been now talking for about an hour and a quarter, and we want to give you the chance to put questions to our guests. So please raise your hand and perhaps wait for the microphone to reach you and put your question to either Bachtyar Ali or Kareem Abdulrahman. Anybody? Yes. Mr. Valka.
Good evening. I would like to ask you, both of you, actually, if what is the position of a young generation of Kurdish citizens? I mean, the very young people or adults or young adults. Are they? I would imagine that knowing about the outside lands and opportunities and different cultural life or different life in general, do they see it as a deficit in a way, like that they are like in a way cheated? Maybe that's not the proper word, but cheated of their potential or the richer life, because it sounds a bit depressing.
بەبڕای من بە نەوەی نوێ تووشی هەمان دابەشبوونی ناوەچی و دەرونی بووە کە زۆربەی کۆمەڵگا خۆرهەڵاتیەکان خۆی تووشی بوون.
I think the younger generation is suffering from the same internal divisions that the society in the Middle East is suffering from.
لە ڕوویەکەوە هەوڵەیە مۆدێرن بێ، لە ڕوویەکەوە نازانێت چۆن مۆدێرن بێت.
On the one hand, they would like to be modern, but on the other hand, they don't know how to be modern.
چونچە مۆدێرن بوون تەنیا لە شتە دیاردە و سەطحەکانە وەرگیراوە لە کۆمەڵگا خۆرهەڵاتیەکانە.
Because in the Middle East, modernity is taken to mean things at face value.
یعنی نەگەیشتۆتە ناو ئاستی بیرکردنەوە، نەبوو بە مۆراڵ، نەبوو بە ڕەفتار، نەبوو بە شێوە جیهانبینیەکی نوێ کە مرۆڤ لە ڕێگایەوە لە ڕێگەی چەمچوونیەوە لە ڕێگەی ئەخلاقی نوێەوە لە ژیان تێبگات و ژیان تەفسیر بکە.
Because it has not become part of the moral system, it hasn't become part of behavior, and it hasn't become part of a worldview through which you would see things in a different way and you would act in a different way as a result.
لەبەرو تەماشاکەی ئەگەر چی کۆمەڵگا کە کۆمەڵگایەکە زۆر دیاردەی مۆدێرنیتیایە، بە هەمان شێوە هێزە دینیەکان و هێنزە کۆنزەرواتیڤەکان زۆر بە ئاسانی ئەتوانن گەنج تا ئێستا ڕابچێشن و بە گروپی دینیان پێدروستکەن و تونڕەویانکەن و هەموو ئەو زەمینانی کە هێزی تونڕە و ڕاسیست و ناسیۆنالیستە ئیشیتیاکەن ئامادەیە لە کۆمەڵگای ئێمە لە ناو گەنجەکان چە ئەیبینی تەوانێ.
So because of that, while you have this attraction of modernity, at the same time the religious and the conservative forces, they are still able to find ways to influence and attract the younger generation.
ئەشی بینین کە بەشێکی زۆر لە خەڵکانی توندڕە و تیرۆریست و ئەکستریمیست لە خۆرهەڵاتە گەنجن.
And as we have observed, most radical extremist people in the Middle East are actually young people.
لەبەرەوەی خەڵکێکن باوەڕیان بە حەل لە سیاسیە دنیایەکان نەماوە تا ئەندازەیەکی زۆر. یعنی سیاست بە جۆرێک ناومێدی کردوون کە بە دوای چارەسەرێکی غەیبیە ئەگەڕێن.
Because there are people who have been so let down by the worldly solutions to their problems, they are now looking to mythical solutions to solve their problems.
هەوە شەوا کە هێزێکی وەکو داعش یا ئیسیس زۆر بە ئاسانی خەڵک بدۆزێتەوە لەناو کۆمەڵگەکانی خۆرهەڵات.
And that's the reason why ISIS has found it so easy to recruit people in the Middle Eastern societies.
چونچە نەوەیەک هەیە کە بە هیچ جۆرێ بڕوای بە قیەمە دنیایەکان نەماوە ئەو حەلە دنیانی کە ئایدۆلۆژیەکانی تر پێشکەشیەکەن.
Because you have a generation that does not believe anymore in the solutions offered by the worldly forces. That's the forces that have been part of the political equation for some time now.
I would like to ask Mr. Bachtyar Ali if he's familiar with the book Alexandria Quartet by Lawrence Darrell. Because when I was reading your book, it often reminded me of that book in the way you use the different perspectives of the characters and the way of their narration. And if you don't know that book, if there are any other books that inspired you to do that.
کتێبەکەی دارێل ناسم تەمەن بێگومان کتێبێکی بەناو بانگە.
Of course, I'm familiar with the book you mentioned.
بەڵام من زیاتر لەژێر کاری لەو ڕۆمانە فرۆ دەنگی ڕۆمانی پۆلیۆنی زیاتر لەژێر کاریگەری بڵێ کەسانی وەکو فۆکنەر و گابریێل گارسیا مارکیزا تاواکو دارێل.
But in terms of direct influences, I am much more under the influence of people like William Faulkner and Gabriel Garcia Marquez when it comes to polyphony and having various voices in my novels.
تەکنیکێک لە دۆستۆفسکیەوە بەڕاستی زۆر بە هونەریانە بەکارهێنراوە.
A technique that of course goes back to Dostoevsky, who has used it very artistically.
لە ڕێگای کۆمەڵە نووسەری تریشۆ جێگە لە داریێل نییە سوودم لەو تەکنیکە وەرگرتووە.
And I've made use of this technique, which has been used by other writers successfully as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more question, yes?
Děkuji, mé jméno je Rashid Khalil, pocházím také z Kurdistánu. Budu mluvit česky, protože češtinu moc dobře neovládám. Moc mě těší, že dneska vidím svoje krajany, na které jsem hrdý, protože je to samo o sobě zázrak, že dneska Kurdové můžou vydávat knihy. Protože jak se zmínil... Ano.
Hello, I'm also from Kurdistan, and I'm very glad that I can see here my fellow countrymen, and I'm very proud of you because I'm proud of the fact that there are Kurd people that can publish books.
Protože ty režimy v Kurdistánu samozřejmě postihovaly jakoukoliv politickou aktivitu, ale hlavně a nejvíce se soustředovali na postih spisovatelů, básníků, kteří vlastně usilovali o to, aby náš jazyk nezaniknul.
Because the regimes in Kurdistan, they of course persecuted a lot of political activities, but they also persecuted a lot of literary and artistic activities that themselves tried to withhold our language so that it doesn't cease.
A samozřejmě role spisovatelů a literátů nespočívala v tom, že by jenom psali knihy, ale když byly nejhorší časy, tak se z nich stali i pešmergové a bojovali se zbraní v ruce.
And the role of writers was not only to write books, but when it came in some difficult times, they also became peshmergas and they had to fight with their guns in their hands.
A znám spoustu jmen literátů a básníků, kteří padli v boji hlavně v iráckém Kurdistánu za režimu Saddama Husseina.
And I know many names of writers, literates who died under the regime of Saddam Hussein in Iraq.
A jako naštěstí dostali jsme se do dnešního dne, kdy Kurdistán jde cestou vyhlášení Kurdské republiky, které bychom měli jako všichni v Čechách držet palce.
And I'm glad that we are now in times when Kurdistan is on the way to proclaiming their independent republic, and we should all be fans of that in the Czech Republic.
A končím otázkou přímo na autora. Zdá se chystá překlad do dialektu kurmanji. Děkuju.
And the question to the author is there, are you planning a translation into the dialect Kurmanji? Thank you.
لسه 4 كتابي من هي بكرمانجي.
Currently, 4 of my novels are available in the Kermanji dialect.
ولا اسطنبول شاب كراون.
They were published in Istanbul
ولا نشري افيستا.
by Avesta Press.
روماني ايواري بروانه.
Parwana's Evening.
جمشيد خاني مامم.
Jamshid Khan, my uncle.
دوها من هناري دنيا.
The Last Pomegranate in the World.
كوشي بالندا غمجينا كان.
And the Palace of the Sad Birds.
همو كراو بكرمانجي.
All of these are available in Kermanji.
وإسا بروجي همو كتير كارا كام كراو بكرمانجي.
And there's a project to translate all of my novels into Kermanji.
وكتيب كان همو برفروش ترين كريب بون لا ناوتشا كوردي كاين تركيا لا الوريتشي رانينا.
And all the books that have been translated were bestsellers in the Kermanji speaking areas in Kurdistan in Turkey.
Thank you very much. I have a question regarding both the book and the translation. The book we have been mentioning several times, that is, I Stared at the Night of the City. And I wanted to ask a very particular question regarding the title. Because as I've read, the original or the literal translation from Kurdish of the title of this book would be Ghazalnus and the Gardens of Imagination. And I was struck by that title because to me, Gardens of Imagination immediately evokes something very poetic, and it sounds wonderful. And I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about the title of the book in Kurdish, and then Kareem, if you could explain why you chose not to use this quite poetically sounding title and choose the one the book has now instead. Thank you.
من لە ئیشەکانی خۆمە بەردەوام هەوڵەیەم نییە بەها ستاتیکیەکان بەها جوانەکان لە بەرامبەر بەها سیاسیەکان ڕابگرم واتە شەڕێکێ لە بینی شعر و سیاسەدا لە ئیشی منە ئازانیە.
In my work there's always an ongoing conflict between the aesthetics and the politics, between poetry and politics, and I'm trying to keep that balance.
لە ناونیشانی غەزەلنووس و باخەکانی خەیاڵیش تا حدێک ئەم بڵیت تەجسیدکردنی ئەو جەنگەیە باخەکانی خەیاڵ ئەو شوێنەیە کە بەرامبەری واقعی تاڵی کۆمەلگای کوردی و ئەو ژیانە ناشرینیە کە خەڵکی تیا ژیە.
And the same applies to the title Ghazalnus and the Gardens of Imagination. By the Garden of Imagination, I mean the imaginary spaces that the society has and through which they try to challenge the bitter reality. This is probably the most frequently asked question, especially by Kurdish readers who are absolutely enraged why the Kurdish title was not kept in the English edition. And the short answer for that is it's because of the publisher, because the publisher has the final say on under which title he would publish the novel. And he explained his logic to me and Bachtyar, and based on what he said, it seemed to make sense. Of course, I'm quite sentimental in a sense, and I still wanted the novel to be published under the original title, Ghazalnus and the Garden of Imagination, but it wasn't. And his explanation is this. He said there are two things in the Kurdish title. First, the word Ghazalnus, the sound Gh is not even available in English as a language. So when people just talk about it to each other, they'll first have a problem pronouncing the word, and this will create a barrier in how you want to for the title to travel between people. But more importantly, he said the word garden may immediately conjure the image of this is a fantasy novel. Fantasy, as in the fantasy genre as we know it in the West, which is not. And he said this would mislead readers, because this is not like gardens, either in the sense of fantasy genre or in the sense of the old works of ancient literature where they talked about gardens and garden of roses. So once he explained this, and he said this title is not going to work in English, in his view, he asked us for alternative titles. And one of the chapters in the book is called I Stared at the Night of the City and Saw Blood. That's the full title of one of the chapters. And me and Bachtyar suggested some alternative titles. I suggested this title, including the words, and I saw blood, because it's a very important moment in the novel where the character that we were reading about earlier, where he sees a very important change in the story. And he said, well, I actually like this title, but if we put the word blood on the cover, it may make people think this is a crime novel, which again, it's not a crime novel, even though a crime is happening in the novel. So he decided to take some poetic license and use I Stared at the Night of the City.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more, yes.
Yeah, good evening. I was reading one of your interviews in Farsi because I'm from Iran, and I found out you like Persian literature. If you agree with me, which writers or why and why?
ئەدەبی ئێرانی کاریگەرێکی زۆری لەسەر من بووە لە ڕاستیە ناتوانم گەشەی سەرەتایی ئەدەبی خۆم لە کاریگەری ئەدەبی ئێرانی جیا بکەمەوانێ.
I'm hugely influenced by the Iranian literature, so much so that my early development cannot be separated from the influence that I have from Iranian literature.
لە ئەدەبیاتی کلاسیکەوە بیگراتاوەکو ئەدەبیاتی مۆدێرن بە تایبەتی ئەدەبیاتی مۆدێرن شاملۆ سۆهرابی سپهەری فەروخی فەروخزاد دەوڵەت ئابادی عەباسی معروفی بەشی هەرە زۆری ئەو نووسەرانە من لە ژێر کاریگەریان نابووم.
I've been influenced by writers, classic writers, but especially by modern Iranian writers. Sohrabi Sabhari, Abbasi Ma'rufi, Farughi Faroukzad, and the rest he mentioned it. By the way, Bachtyar speaks Farsi and reads in Farsi.
دەوڵەت ئابادی بۆ من نووسەرێکی گرنگ بوو لە تەجروبەی ناسینی ئەدەبیاتی ئێرانی بە تایبەتی ئەدەبیاتی ڕۆمانە.
Dawlat Abadi was especially important for me, especially when it comes to fiction.
کە لە ئێستا برادری شین هاوڕێین لەگەڵ ئاغای دەوڵەت ئابادیە.
And now we are friends as well.
بۆ من گرنگ بوو لەبەرەوەی هێزی لە وەسفکردنەوە هێزی لە وێناکردنی دنیای شەرقیە پێشتر تەنیا و لای یەشار کەمال و هێزەمان بینیوە لە وێناکردنی کارکتەر دروستکردنی ڕوودا و جێڕانەوە نەفەس لە جێڕانەوەیە.
His power of description, his characterization, the way he can tell a story and create history, it's something we have only seen in Yashar Kamal.
Yashar Kamal نووسەرێکە بە تورکیا نووسیەمەگەن ناسراوە بزەم.
Yashar Kamal, who's from Turkey and whose work has been translated into European languages.
One last question, if I may. You mentioned, if I understood you correctly, that you have completed a translation of one of the books by Milan Kundera, but that it hasn't been published yet. Will it be?
Well, I hope so. The only reason why it hasn't been published, it's partly due to the many things I've been working on at the same time. But all I need to do, it's actually the rather short novel, Ignorance. So I've finished the translation. I just need someone else to review my translation.
And you translated it from the French or from English?
The English version.
The English version. So Kundera, will he be the first Czech writer to be published in Kurdish?
Actually, no. Many of Kundera's works have been translated into Kurdish, and he's someone who's very well known. And there's another Czech novelist whose name it just escapes me.
Čapek, perhaps? Karel Čapek?
Karel Čapek.
He has been translated. There is someone else, Bohimal, please.
Haraba.
Bohumil Haraba.
Yes, I think at least 2 of his novels have been translated as well.
Thank you very much. Having heard the gentleman who is your compatriot and lives in Prague, the idea came to me that perhaps we have a potential translator of this novel into Czech. But I'm afraid his work would be also hampered by the lack of Czech Kurdish dictionaries. This country has a strong tradition in translations from the Persian literature, so perhaps he can help himself if he assumes that task by using Czech Persian or Persian Czech dictionaries. But of course I don't want to impose that important task on him, and it would be great if your novel would find its way into Czech as well. You want to react to that? Okay, fine.
Where is our home Khartoum?
And who is the writer?
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think this was an exhaustive survey of the movement of Kurdish literature into both Western languages and into Czech. Thank you very much for being an attentive audience, and thank you very much our guests, Bachtyar Ali and and Kareem Abdulrahman.